Hello, it's Anthony and welcome to Property MetriX. In this video, continuing the series on professional service and closing fees, I'm going to walk you through the purchase costs of a first-time buyer, building on from the previous video where I spoke about the mortgage broker fees and mortgage broker charges. I'm also now going to introduce the conveyancer charges to give you a better idea of what the purchase cost of a first-time buy is likely to be. So again, here with my handy whiteboard, so let's start breaking down those purchasing costs. So purchasing costs, purchasing costs. Okay. Oops. So let's assume, see if I can do a funny line of that. Let's make the line a bit more straight, as straight as we can make it. So let's assume you are a first-time buyer and you're purchasing a, let's say a slightly high property. Let's say £200,000 property. So you've agreed a purchase price of £200,000. And let's assume your deposit is 10%. So equals £20,000. Okay. Now, the key costs you are likely to have as a first-time buyer are, so one is your deposit, two, stamp duty. So stamp duty, I should have mentioned in the last video exactly what stamp duty is. So stamp duty is property tax. So it's the money you pay to the government for as a tax for purchasing a property. But as a first-time buyer in England and Northern Ireland, you pay 0% up to £425,000. So basically, if you buy a house that's less than £425,000, you pay nothing in stamp duty in England and Northern Ireland. Slightly different in Wales and Scotland. So if you are purchasing a property in Wales and Scotland, refer to the stamp duty thresholds in your local area. So the third cost is your mortgage costs. So mortgage broker cost. Okay, so there's typically there's a few types of mortgage costs or mortgage product costs, and I probably should go into more detail about them here. So the first would be the arrangement fee. So that's the fee you charge to get you the mortgage or apply for the mortgage for you. So arrangement fee. Again, if you go directly through the lender or bank, would be zero. But if you go to a mortgage broker or independent mortgage broker, they're likely to charge between £500, 500 to £1,000, depending on where the mortgage broker is located in the country. So another key point I should mention is you don't need to use a mortgage broker that's close to where you live. So if you live in London, it's perfectly fine if you use a mortgage broker that lives in Leeds, because they're effectively all doing the same professional service. They are doing the legal work involved in exchanging contracts, so the legal work involved in transferring ownership of a property. So it doesn't matter where in the country they're located, they provide a similar level of service. So you don't need to use a mortgage broker that's close to where you live. As well as that, if you need to provide any documentation like passports or identification, etc., a lot of these services are now done online through PDFs and stuff like that. So you don't really need to go into the office physically to give any more information. So when buying this service, you could be choosy and potentially go for the cheaper options if possible. But again, in my video, I did mention that sometimes price and service are correlated. So don't just use a cheaper service. Make sure that they have good reviews or recommendation. Because if the broker you may want to use a bit more expensive, but you know you're going to get a good quality service, then you might want to go for the slightly more expensive broker that gives you a better service, and the cheaper broker that's like absolutely shocking to work with. Okay. There's another fee I should have mentioned with mortgages, and it's called a product fee. Fee. So with some mortgages, lenders have a product fee. So it's a product fee. You can think of it as like an administration fee the lenders charge for arranging that, for giving you that particular mortgage. And it's typically between, I would say, £0 to £2,000. Okay? And what's the difference? Well, the mortgages with zero product fee tends to have a higher interest rate, where the ones with a product fee tend to give you a slightly lower interest rate. So you kind of need to make an assessment whether I'd rather go for the zero product fee, pay the slightly higher interest rate because it's over the life of the mortgage, it's not really that material, or you're happy to pay the product fee up front and get a slightly lower interest rate. But with mortgages that I've typically gone for, I typically go for the zero product fee. But on a bigger mortgage, a bigger size mortgages, it may be more value to pay the product fee for the slightly lower rate, because that may give you a much better saving over the life of a mortgage. So these are really the two key kind of mortgage fees. So whether you go for someone to arrange the mortgage for you, if it's done directly through the bank or lender, it's free. If you go for a broker, so I should write broker here, an independent broker, typically between £500 to £1,000, and all mortgages have some kind of product fee. Again, if you choose a zero cost product fee, they typically come at a slightly higher rate, and if you choose a product fee, you get a slightly lower rate on your mortgage product. And the fourth cost of purchase of property is the conveyancing cost. Conveyancing. A-N-C-I-N-G. Conveyancing. So that's, or legal fees. And this typically costs, well, it's broken down into a few parts, really. So you've got the actual conveyancing fee, so the conveyancing fee, and something called searches. So, and the final fee is your kind of checks, registration, and disbursements. So, so what are these key components of a conveyancing fee? Well, the conveyancing fee is the fee that the actual conveyancer charges you to do their work. So that's the fee for the legal work. And that's typically, again, between £500 to £1,000. That's before VAT. Obviously, VAT gets added in afterwards. Searches, so your conveyancer also does something for you called searches. So they'll do some search to make sure your property is not a flood risk, or is not an environmental risk, or on contaminated land. So basically, just they check to make sure your property is in a good spot, is in a good place, and it's not a risk to you. And these typically cost between £250 to £400. And then your checks. So that's like your AML checks, so anti-money laundering, know your customer, so KYC checks, etc. and registration fees, so just to register the title from the seller to you, and any disbursement fees. So these are like your government kind of, uh, required stuff to do effectively. So to register the property, to check that there's no money laundering, and to get the relevant disbursements, etc., in place. So if you add those all together, you find your kind of total conveyancing fee would be typically in the range of, from experience, I would say 1,500 to £2,500. So let's go in the middle and say you should expect to pay around £2,000 for your conveyancing fee. Obviously, this differs based on where you're in the country. I find, again, in the north of the country, you get slightly cheaper conveyancing services, where in the south of the country it tends to be a bit more expensive. So what I found is in the north. So a key point to mention: the searches and the checks, etc., disbursements, and registration. This fee doesn't vary too much because they are pretty much standard. It's really the fee the individual conveyancer charges you for their services that tends to vary. So this portion of the conveyancing service, I didn't give this a cost here, but let's say this should be about, let's just say, about £400, I would say, on average, is a cost for the checks and the registration and disbursements. And I should also put stamp duty as well, because your conveyancer pays the stamp duty for you typically on your behalf, and they charge a little fee for it. So so again, I put 500 to 1,000 for the conveyancer fee, but again, in the south of the country, you could find this being a bit more. But this is really the part you can optimize on to save costs when purchasing a property. You may get a slightly cheaper conveyancer with regard to how much they charge for their fees. So bearing all this in mind, what then is likely to be your closing costs when purchasing a property? And let's say we're using £200,000 as an example. So again, at £200,000, your costs are likely to be your £20,000 for your deposit. Okay. Plus, because the property is less than, and I'm assuming your purchase is in England, Northern Ireland, it's slightly different if you're in Scotland or Wales. But let's say we're purchasing a property in England. So because it's below £425,000, the stamp duty will be 0. So let's put them here. So deposit, stamp duty. And also something to bear in mind as well, from the 1st of April 2025, stamp duty for first-time buyer threshold is going to go to £300,000. So if you purchase a home for £310,000, you will be liable for stamp duty. The threshold is going to drop from £425,000 to £300,000, so bear that in mind. Okay, so back to the kind of purchasing costs. So again, we said your deposit, £20,000. Your stamp duty will be 0 because the property is less than 425. Your mortgage arrangement fee, let's assume you went with a lender directly, so you paid 0. And let's say you went for the 0 product fee option as well, so you pay 0 for that too. And then we add on your conveyancing fee of £2,000. That means your total purchase price, or your total purchasing costs, would be your £20,000 deposit, nothing for stamp duty, nothing for your mortgage arrangement fee because you use a mortgage advisor, £2,000 for stamp duty. So that would be, you would need £22,000 as your purchasing cost. Now let's say you're purchasing a property and you chose to get your mortgage from a mortgage broker because you wanted them to compare the whole market rather than using a mortgage advisor with a bank or lender. So you didn't go direct, you went through a mortgage broker. So your purchasing cost would be your £20,000 deposit, no stamp duty. Again, let's say you went for a no product fee mortgage, and you just paid your mortgage broker costs of, let's go in the middle again, of 750. Oh, sorry, let me rub it out because I've gone on to the stamp duty section. So that would be 750 plus your conveyancing or your legal fees of £2,000. That would make your total purchasing costs of 20,000 plus the 750, so that's 20,750 plus 2,000, so that'll be £22,000, 750. So this is very important information to know, that when you are purchasing a property, you're not just thinking about the deposit only, you also need to think about your purchasing costs. And your key purchasing costs when purchasing property are stamp duty, mortgage costs, and conveyancing legal fees. I hope you found this very informative and very useful as a first-time buyer, just to get a sense of what kind of costs you need to take into consideration so you can budget accordingly and budget effectively when you are putting your funds together to purchase your first property. Again, thank you for tuning in, and I hope you found this very useful and informative. Catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.